All right, everybody. I want to talk about this post from Elon Musk that he posted on X a couple hours ago, where he said that he's been thinking about the fastest way to bring a terawatt of compute online, and that is roughly equivalent to all electrical power produced in America today. Now, what's interesting about this post is that it's pinned to the top of his profile on X. Usually when Elon does that, it highlights some sort of big thing that he might be working on something that he's pointing towards. But when I read that, and those that follow the channel closely, you know that I cover Tesla very closely and AI and stuff like that and batteries, EV. This post reminds me of when they initially announced that they were building this gigafactory, the Nevada gigafactory, that was meant to build batteries for electric vehicles. At the time, the project was going to essentially double the world's capacity of batteries once it was finished building, because they were trying to build a bunch of electric vehicles. They were building the Model 3, then the Model Y. And so you need a lot of batteries to power that. And I remember at that time, people were like, crazy, no way, this is not going to happen. The craziest thing I've ever heard. You're never going to get it done. This electric vehicle thing is a scam. It's a green new scam, right? Remember that? The green new scam. But it was looked at as a overly ambitious thing that would never go anywhere. And then lo and behold, 10 years later, not only was that project extremely successful and still ramping, but the rest of the world, especially China, has now caught up or is in a lot of ways leading that electric vehicle charge. But a company like Tesla has benefited tremendously from Giga Nevada because now they have the batteries for their cars. They've also built Giga Texas. They're building batteries there. And now you have this entire ecosystem that's going. And now this post is very reminiscent of that because now he's talking about compute, but specifically the energy needed to power compute. So why is this important? If you think about what has been happening for the last 5 years with AI, with LLMs, ChatGPT, right? And then you have FSD with Tesla and all these other companies that are trying to build artificial intelligence for technology. The technologies have been proven as very, very useful. Very, very useful. But the problem is that the amount of chips and the amount of energy required to build these systems is tremendous, especially if you're trying to get it to the point where you want to truly make life-changing, world-changing stuff. Right now, artificial intelligence uses the chips primarily for things like ChatGPT, for things like Grok, Gemini, all these other AI startups that are coming up, 11 Labs, you have Replit, Tesla's, of course, with their FSD computer in the car and their compute at the Colossus and all these other things that they're building at the Giga Texas that basically creates an AI brain for the car to drive itself. And one of the things we've been running into has been bottlenecks from a GPU perspective, from the actual compute perspective. But as that gets ramped and those chips become more and more plentiful with companies like NVIDIA and all these other companies out there building chips, as these chips come on board, you're going to need to power them. And if you follow podcasts like All In specifically, and other business podcasts as well, entrepreneurship podcasts, sort of macro podcasts, the biggest thing that they've been highlighting has been energy. Energy is going to be a gigantic bottleneck. Even the Trump administration has talked about energy being a gigantic bottleneck. And so at some point, you would think that for us to be able to serve the needs from the AI perspective and trying to push that forward, energy has to also follow quickly. If anything, it needs to get ahead of it so that we don't run into any major bottlenecks. However, the problem from the US's perspective is that the energy sector, some of it because of regulation, but primarily because of how weird the United States grid is and some of the sort of bottlenecks and ceilings we've put on the industry, for grid companies and energy companies to really get to where they need to be for us to power AI long term, it requires this incredible transformation of culture and how we approach energy for them to actually be able to power AI systems. We've already heard from many different places that artificial intelligence is going to cause problems. Look at a state like California example, even in Texas where I live, not even talking about the rest of the world, the grid can barely handle what we have now. California has rolling blackouts in the summertime, right? Texas, God forbid we get 2 inches of snow, right? If you remember from a few years ago, the entire state was like in shambles because of some weather, right? But a lot of this is because the grid, our ability to power things is antiquated. It hasn't caught up with where we're going. And forget entirely of where we need to be from an AI perspective. And so what Elon Musk is proposing here is that he is looking to literally double the United States' ability to create power, but specifically in this case, for his compute ambitions, for XAI, for Tesla, whatever that may be. I think it's going to be very wise for people, especially those that follow this channel closely and follow the Musk industry closely, to assume as this will happen, okay? There hasn't been one time where Elon specifically has set out some sort of major goal. We're going to make reusable rockets. We're going to make an electric vehicle. We're going to make it profitable. We're going to make more batteries than the rest of the world combined. We're going to create a self-driving system with FSD using only vision and AI. If you drive the cars, you know exactly what I'm talking about. We're going to make a brain chip implant where people are going to be able to, regain a lot of their previous abilities as far as communicating and interfacing with the computer goes. By the way, we're going to have an interview with the third Neuralink patient here on the channel shortly. Freaking mind-blowing discussion. Shout out to Brad. But these long-term, large-scale projects get done. And so from a logistics perspective, and I was able to think through this after we recorded our podcast today with Jordan Gisagi from The Limiting Factor. That podcast will go live probably tomorrow, which is going to really build on what I'm talking about here right now, is that we're going to have a ginormous amount of batteries, and we're going to have a ginormous amount of solar panels. We'll also have a significant, ginormous growth in natural gas, ginormous growth in potentially things like coal, hydro, wind, whatever. But we're going to have an incredible forcing function to get energy ramped up. But in the long term, a lot of the economics points towards solar and batteries being a huge percentage of that. Mainly because if you really think about it, the sun, we've talked about this, many people say this, right? The sun is just passive nuclear. What do I mean by that? The sun uses the same exact thing that a nuclear plant uses today, right now, to power itself. The sun is very similar to nuclear plants, right? Nuclear plants use fission, the sun uses fusion, whatever, nerdy technical stuff. I don't even want to get into it, probably because I probably don't even understand it where I should. But in other words, you have a free energy source out in space that you can harvest using solar panels. And what's interesting is now we're at the point where solar is really becoming something that makes sense from an economics perspective. If you look at Texas, Texas is now the most friendly state to solar because from an economics perspective and sort of the geographic perspective of the state where the sun shines, right? Now it makes perfect sense for Texas to shift a lot of its energy generation towards solar plus batteries. And so with this sort of thing that Elon's working on now, the signal that we're getting is that we're going to head towards a world where the manufacturing of batteries and the manufacturing of solar panels and the advent of super powerful artificial intelligence, and hopefully it should be very plentiful and very affordable energy can now become a reality. But doing something like this is going to require some very fundamental changes to our sort of how the United States and probably the rest of the world operates around energy. In the United States right now, if you want to hook up to the grid, you are going to be limited by the grid. You're not going to be able to go as fast as you need or generate enough energy from the grid to be able to power the things you're looking to do. There literally won't be enough capacity because a lot of these guys are slow, entrenched, overregulated. They have lobbyists, right? It's very similar to the oil and gas lobby and how, we were thinking about moving the world to a sustainable transport and getting electric vehicles out there. Or even in healthcare, right? Which Trump just passed an executive order today, which is very, very exciting. We'll talk about that in a separate video. But you will be limited by how fast these grids can create power. However, there are ways for these companies to go what's called behind the meter, but sort of off the grid in a way, and generate your own power. You don't have to hook up to the grid necessarily. You can generate your own power. And there's some states that actually incentivize this. I've learned, I think New Jersey or Maine is like the friendliest state for behind the meter. Sort of they created a lot of incentives for people to generate their own energy. Now, it won't be at the scale of, let's say, doubling America's power generation. But there is a path for companies, Musk industry, whatever, to make enough solar panels and batteries to power their own thing. Nuclear plants, wind turbines, I don't know, make up whatever you want. But battery and solar will 1000% be part of that equation because it's economically viable. And then the push of this sort of thing that we're going towards, right? Just getting way more batteries to power, it's going to dramatically lower the cost of batteries even further because we're going to start introducing new chemistries and new ways of building batteries and new formats of those batteries that are going to make powering things much more affordable, much more plentiful. And it's going to get us quickly towards the world where we're going to have truly sustainable energy generation and energy storage and energy consumption, right? Like it's actually freaking happening. It's actually freaking happening. I think it sort of ties in a lot of different pieces that we follow very closely on this channel. One of the things to look for very closely is the development of new battery chemistries. On my podcast with Hans and Jordan, again, that will publish tomorrow in full, super deep dive into what I'm talking about right now. A lot of what I'm saying right now, I learned from that podcast, okay? Things like sodium ion batteries instead of lithium ion batteries can become a huge variable in this, and there's huge benefits there because now you're not reliant on a material that's going to be much, let's say, much more difficult and much more expensive to mine or harvest in relation to something like sodium. Sodium is way more plentiful, and it's specifically plentiful in places like the United States, so you're not reliant on other countries to source your lithium and source your other materials. You can start localizing a lot of that production. But there's now some legitimate movement towards this like future we all want, which is like basically free energy everywhere. And I know this sounds hyperbolic and crazy, but I think there's something behind the guy that gets shit done at a really large scale. When he pins something like this to his profile, it means something. It means something. And my takeaway, AI is about to go crazy. Energy is about to go crazy. Tesla's about to go crazy. XAI is about to go crazy. Are these things now, does it make sense for them to, get together since XAI is going to need a lot of power for their compute? And Tesla happens to make batteries and solar. Drew Baglino started a transformer company. J.B. Straubel has a battery recycling company. Who's the next executive at Tesla that's going to leave the company and then start a new company that's going to be super supplemental to Tesla and Musk industry? And they're going to be on the board. It's crazy. Anyway, if you really want to listen to this in detail, make sure to come back to the channel tomorrow. We'll have the full discussion with Jordan Gisigi and Hans on. Super crazy deep dive into this. And we'll have follow-on discussions on this because this is actually one of the very first sort of signals that says that this large-scale thing is actually happening. And there's going to be a lot of winners. I don't want to just be like, Tesla's the only winner. No way. Everybody's going to win. If you make batteries or make energy or consume energy, you're going to win. In some shape or form, you're going to win. It's all dependent on how the doors are open, how regulation is lifted. Sorry if I tapped that. I did. And how we scale towards this future. Because the pathway is there. The talent is there. The will is there. Can we actually get there? And I feel like we can. Anyway, go check out that full discussion. Thanks.